Tim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
No.
Did you say Tim or Jim?
What's that? No, we just at the start of the meeting for any of the commissioners that are online, they have to
Great,
introduce themselves so that way the public knows that you're a planning commission member.
great. Tim Sinnott, Planning Commission member.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I didn't explain that. I just threw
All
that
good, all good. Thank you.
out. Do we need to review Zoom procedures, Mike?
I would say it looks good. Meredith is going to be running things remotely. She's the zoning administrator. She's used to running these things, so she's going to do some the admitting, and we're going to keep the system kind of locked down. So raise your hand, use the raise hand function if you want to be called on, and we will unmute you as you get identified. And it looks like everyone's already changed their names to reflect their names. So that step is already taken care of. So I think we're good.
Okay, great. All right. Approval of the agenda. Does anyone want to move approval of the agenda?
Yeah, I would, but I think that there was one change that I would recommend making to the agenda, which is to put the comments of Kim Chaney before
Yes.
comments of the chair and general business, or
Yeah,
one of the other.
that sounds good. Anyone want to move the agenda with that change? Whoa.
So before general business?
Or it can,
before
we
comments
can go
from the chair?
before comments from the chair.
I second that as amended.
I don't think anyone moved, but, or did you move that?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Aaron moved it. Gabe second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, Kim, go ahead.
Am I on?
You are on.
Well, I wanted to be here because I worked with Mike, some 10 years ago.
Well, make sure you're close enough to the microphone so you can be heard.
Okay. And, when we met a couple of months ago, one of the things I enjoyed about Mike is he was always looking for some improbable solution to an improbable problem. And we would get ourselves in a knot, and he would say, "Oh, Mike, come down here and
All right.
I'll tell you, I think we all know what Mike would say." But I made this present for him because he and I shared the same.
That says God himself must need to be traduced if there is no unicorn.
Mike is
Always
always,
looking for our unicorns.
he is. And as a supplement, I give you one, this one's actually photograph of what's in the cloisters.
Ah,
And now that you have an office, I think you can. hang this.
yes.
And I wanted to point out,
Very nice.
given what's on your agenda, you'll be probably glad to know that I share something with a large part of the Montpelier population. I have an excellent habitat for unicorns in my backyard, and I'm fighting to protect them all from being disturbed.
Yes.
And I'm sure you'll have the same issues.
Yes, we will.
And
I
wanted to
appreciate it.
thank Mike
Thank you, Kim.
for being a good leader and having a good sense of humor.
All right.
That's
When
my,
I get up there, I'll explain it to some people, a little bit of the history of the unicorns so everyone has a full context. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Keep it up. You'll need them. Thank you all. Good luck.
Okay,
Thanks,
thanks,
Kim.
Kim.
You.
So Kim was our planning commission chair for many years when I first got here. And one of the things when we started the planning process was we came around, we were looking, how do we frame our implementation plans? And so we came up with an entire document on how do we have a city full of butterflies, rainbows, and unicorns. And so it became a running thing that we're planning and protecting our unicorns, because we just had to go through and figure out how we were going to frame it. And we didn't want to talk about actual issues. So that was what we talked about was, all right, if that's what we wanted, what would it take? And so I appreciate that, Kim. So not everybody would fully understand where that unicorn came from, but that's
We
That's
got
the home of
we
it.
got the idea. We all have some unicorns we're trying to.
Keep your eye out for them. You'll find them in the work you're doing.
yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night.
Okay, so I guess that's comments, so now we're comments from the chair. I just wanted to check in briefly, Mike, about, I know you said just the article in the Bridge about the housing committee members, and you said you're working on a memo to city council, is that?
Yes, so I am working, I've got part of it done. I wanted to get it done for today so you guys would be able to have it, but I'll certainly forward it to you when I send it to council. Just to outline from our perspective what happened, and to go through, because we did say we would integrate as much as we could. And we did integrate a number of pieces. So I do want to go through theirs and kind of bullet out, these were the requests, these were the things we were able to integrate, these were the things we weren't, and to try to explain so the public and council understands the nuances of, we asked for a lot of input, and a lot of committees went through and provided input in the context that we worked with. So it was very easy for us to have a decision of, do we add this strategy, don't add this strategy? Do we make this amendment? This is an error, we should fix it. Lots of those. And the housing committee's comments were not framed in that way, which made it much more difficult to simply go through a quick review of them, because there were a lot of questions of, was this a replacement of what was recommended? In other words, they don't support any of the things that we recommended and only support these, or these new additions are these. And so we really kind of had to have much more of a dialogue, which, as you know, we had that night was our public input, and the next week we approved it. So, or we discussed it, and then 2 weeks later we approved it. So we're on a faster track, and we did get a number of them included, but there are going to be a number of pieces that will take some time to talk and figure out, so we can better integrate them into the city plan. And maybe we can get some of them in, we'll work with city council. Maybe council can get a couple more of them in if the housing committee has a meeting, to be able to work on finding some common ground in there. But
Yeah, okay, great,
that's
thank
the
you.
short answer.
Yeah. And I'd just like to state, I was surprised by the article, and I do feel like, I hope that we can incorporate more of those comments, either when it comes back from city council, or as we continue to kind of look at the city plan, and keep it, our intention to keep it as a working document, going forward. I don't know if anyone else has any comments or thoughts, or speak for
Yeah, I
myself.
think at a minimum, we should tell the housing committee that we will send the recommendations to city council and try to incorporate them this time around. But if that isn't possible, that we'll take it up. I think the housing chapter is the first one that we wanted to review once this plan is approved. We'll tell them if they couldn't make it this go around, we will definitely incorporate them the next time we look at the housing chapter, which will hopefully be within a year or two, right? That's the idea, that we keep this going. Just as a response. And so they feel like they've been able to have a say. but originally the housing committee provided that chapter to the planning commission.
Yeah, and I was gonna acknowledge
Right?
that
This is like,
the housing committee is totally different than
right.
what it
right.
was when we first started the city plan process. So that's part of the difficulty. I think it was a more informal committee when we started the city plan process, and now it's a committee that's appointed by city council,
Hmm.
where the members are appointed by city council. And I think all the members probably have changed over, so.
Yeah. But I think it's important to me that everyone knows that some form of the housing committee drafted that chapter. It wasn't the planning commission kind of freewheeling and like forcing something on them that they didn't want. So there's plenty that we can do with what they sent us.
Yeah, and hopefully, I mean, I don't know if any members would reconsider whether they want to participate again, but I hope we can communicate with the members who resigned and see if there's any way to build bridges, or I don't whatever
Right.
we can do to try to explain and work with them going forward. And then the only other thing I was going to mention is that I am going to miss the next meeting, which is May 14th. And then I think our next meeting is on Memorial Day. So I don't know if we want to reschedule a meeting for May or take May off, or what people are thinking.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I think I've got a conflict on the 12th as well.
Oh, okay. It's
I
the
think it's the
12th,
12th.
yeah.
Unless I've got my days wrong.
No, it probably is. I just.
Can we move it to the 13th or?
Yeah, I mean, that would be up to everybody, which we can take up later if we want.
Okay.
Unless you have some solutions right now.
Okay, yeah, we can take it up at the end. I just wasn't sure if we would have time, but okay. All right, general business, any comments from the public that are not about the public input session on zoning barriers?
Yeah, since you're talking about Steve Whitaker, since you're talking about the housing committee resignations, I think it's a unfortunate and prime example of the failure to engage adequately with the public. And I know that Kim and I's comments and efforts to educate y'all on the importance of regional dispatch thinking for inclusion in the plan was all just, dispensed with, swept under the rug because Mike sent a leading question to the police chief. Police chief says, I like it the way it is, enough said. And that's just not public engagement. That's disrespectful to the people who've spent years learning this stuff and spent hours trying to educate y'all on it. And you didn't even discuss it in here at all. Nobody wanted to know. And similarly, you moved the goalposts with the housing committee. As I understand it, they were told they had till spring. It's now becoming spring and they got it in, but apparently the goalpost was moved up in this frantic effort to cut corners to get the growth center application in. So your whole schedule of, completing it and sending it to the council, getting the regional planning commission to look at it before the council's approved it. Are you aware that game is going on? We already forwarded the plan to the regional planning commission before the city has adopted it. And then we're going to run parallel tracks and see whoever changes it. And it's going to have to be provisional so that the changes can be made back and forth. It's just a freaking game. It's mismanagement. And the growth center application requires the specificity for a growth center expansion. The details that I keep telling you about, you don't talk about or you dispense with, have to be in the city plan. Not a vague actionable plan that is not part of the city plan, has not been adopted, etc. You're heading for a train wreck with the growth center, which means you're heading for a train wreck with the TIF. And you don't seem to be slowing down and talking about it and saying, what can we do here to make this thing more secure? Maybe we just forfeit it and say, we're not going to get the growth center. September 30th is the deadline forever. until the new Act 181 provisions come into place, which could be next spring, next summer, whenever. So I'm not sure that would be a bad thing, but you also didn't include anything for interim uses, like the unhoused are about to get booted for the season. And then Turtle Island's probably going to get in there and mean the unhoused have nowhere to go next fall. And nobody's thought about this. Nobody's talked about, you know, we have this, you know, aspirational, vague self-praise, pat on the back that we're so compassionate and willing, and we can put, you know, homeless in our plan and a nod to it, but we don't do anything about it. We don't, you know, nobody's keeping their eye on the ball. So anyway, I just think even what you just heard, that Mike's gonna try to figure out how to deal with the housing committee, and y'all aren't gonna meet again to approve that before it goes to council. This is just an example of the dysfunction of this commission, of this, planning commission.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Is anyone else here for that section? Okay. The discussion of the alleged open meeting violation. Mike, I don't know if we have any advice from council?
So yeah, I did contact the city attorney on this, and so in broad strokes, so the fact that it wasn't responded to within 10 days, by definition, by default, makes it a denied allegation. So that would be the first thing. But the next piece is, because there's many layers to kind of the issue. The second is that you can't allege an open meeting violation for somebody else. You have to allege it for yourself. So to go and say other people weren't able to get in is not according to some of the rules. The case law isn't the way the open meetings violations would work. So the long and short of it is, if you go through the whole process, there isn't any actions we need to take at this time. The actions that were taken at those meetings were transitory, and therefore, in other words, we made changes to the city plan. That wasn't approved that night. We just approved changes. At the next meeting, they were approved. So there was nothing, there's no follow-up that we need to do in order to rectify and make anything right. So unless and until something else changes, he was saying that things we're okay where we're at. So
Okay, thanks.
Has anybody dealt with the door?
the door issue
situation?
has now been set. So the clocks are set for turning off at the ends of meetings, not at the. So before they were set for like an hour after the start of the meeting. So anyone who wanted to get in, anyone who was late would be able to get in. But as the meeting went on, for security reasons, they wanted to have the door shut. But now the doors are going to be set for closing after meetings are over.
Okay, so that seems like going forward, this isn't going to happen again. That's the most important part
Yes.
of this.
Yeah, and I guess I would also, I don't know if there's just some basic information on some, like, the things that as the chair I should be aware of, because I just wasn't really aware of, what I needed to do with that email. So that would just be, I don't know if there is I assume that exists somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's some training and some information. But generally, if somebody gets something and they have any questions, or if they notice that staff hasn't been CC'd on it and they think this is something that would be relevant, we can go and take a look at it. But sometimes you get them and you see there's got a lot of other people that are involved, but it may be a whole bunch of people, none of which are the staff. So
Okay, that's
if
good.
staff
I
knows,
will.
if
I will
staff know
look
about it,
to
we
see.
will.
Okay, I will look to see if you're on the email next time. That's okay. That's an easy tip.
So I would point out, as the complainant of that, that you had an opportunity to meet within the 10 days for you were not encouraged by staff. This is part of the training. You were not encouraged by staff to honor the law and meet within the 10 days. And instead of by default, he in effect defaulted for you and claimed you're denying it. But nobody's really denying it. It was me that was trying to get back into the meeting. So his claim, his hearsay lawyer's advice, which is totally inappropriate. He's not a lawyer, and he's relaying what he understood the lawyer to say and discounting the fact that I tried to get back in and was not able to get back into the meeting. So this is just par for the course, but the fact that you didn't get training on what the open meeting warning requirements are and keeping the doors unlocked before you took on a chair and vice chair role is, again, that's a fault of staff and a fault of procedures, written procedures for any time you onboard, new planning commission members. But you shouldn't be denying that I was locked out of the meeting and unable to listen.
Nobody denied that you were locked out of the meeting after you
You
left.
just did.
I
You just
we
said
didn't.
that by default, we've denied the violation.
We'll let you take these up with attorneys because
No, you don't get to speak for the planning commission. Your staff, and you should, you
Okay,
screwed this up.
Steve, I understand that you're upset, but this actually isn't even a general business section.
No,
So-
but it is a section that I brought.
Okay, I would like to get to the public input session.
Okay, but we're not done
And
with
we-
this one. You have
Well,
not,
you can take it up with the city attorney or whoever the appropriate person is.
so you're failing to acknowledge that there was anything wrong with that meeting.
I don't know I don't want to say anything. No comments.
it has been.
That's not an option.
Look,
I mean, you got an attorney on your,
Steve, I think we all wish that you had come back into the meeting, that the door hadn't, I think we all can acknowledge the door should not have been
but
locked.
then you're required to take action
But-
and make affirmative findings and admit the violation and put
but-
in writing
but
on the
the-
record
But
what
the
you're. gonna do
reality
different.
is it was a transitory meeting. Nothing was voted on that night.
That
And so
doesn't matter. I was
so
denied
we're
access to hear what was going on.
I'm personally sorry that you didn't get back in there.
That doesn't meet compliance with the law.
I'm just letting you know. That's all I can do.
I mean, you can read that section of law. It's not very complicated.
Yeah, but the section of the law doesn't say, it says it gives us the option to deny the violation.
But you didn't deny it.
We just did. I mean,
Well, it seems unclear whether people are admitting things and denying things at the same time. Maybe y'all should take a vote.
look. Here's the thing, Steve. If you want us to deliberate on this, we can. But we're not gonna allow you to dictate how we deliberate that.
Well, I hear you just want to
No,
sweep it under the
Steve,
rug.
Steve, nobody said that we're gonna sweep it under the rug. If you would like us to, I am happy to have a discussion with the other commissioners about this. However, if we do that, I would like to be able to have that discussion without your input as we are having that discussion.
That's fair.
Can we do that?
Yeah,
Okay. Do you want us to have that discussion?
I do.
I will be happy to do that. Okay, so. So what we have in front of us is, if my understanding is correct, Mike, is that you took this to our counsel, who has advised, my understanding is correct, that because we failed to act within 10 days, under the law, as our attorney understands it, that is a default, and that operates as a denial of the violation. Is that correct? So the first question here is anybody in this group disagree with the premise that the denial of a violation is inappropriate for any reason? Okay. Now, I think I would also, as a courtesy to you, Steve, I think, with my understanding of the situation, I'll stipulate that I was not at that meeting. I've looked at the video afterwards, and so it's unclear when you left, but my understanding is you were here at first, then you left and the doors were locked. I think, does this group agree that we understand and agree with you, Steve? Nobody's contesting that you left the meeting and were unable to come back in. Does that seem fair? All right. Third, and I think most importantly, we also heard from Mike that the cure for that violation going forward, assuming that is a violation, to cure that problem is to ensure that the doors stay unlocked throughout the duration of the meeting. And that the timer on those doors have been changed so that is the case going forward. Those doors will stay open until 7:30 during planning commission meetings when we have it scheduled at that time. Correct? Okay. What other issues need to be resolved?
To acknowledge that you've conducted a meeting that with locked doors, which is a violation of the law. You can reconsider the default denial,
Okay,
right?
so what you're saying is different from what I think the legal standards are for a violation of the public meeting laws. The question is whether or not there's a violation.
And if I was unable to
And,
get into a
and,
meeting
and
while
our,
y'all
and
were
our,
doing
and our
business.
obligation under section 314, as I understand it is we can either acknowledge the violation and institute a cure for that, or we can deny that the violation took place. I think what we've told you, and let anybody here in this room disagree with me if that's not the case, is we are denying that the violation took place.
That's far from the course. And it's dishonest as hell.
Well,
You need to acknowledge the violation or you're just gonna allow that
and
stuff to keep on happening.
I'm telling you that's not the case under the law. We do not have to acknowledge the violation. We have the option.
That's a weasel word.
No, it's not. It is in there, Steve.
But
Steve,
you had the opportunity before the 10 days had lapsed.
Steve,
You were in-
Steve.
You violated it by not meeting within the 10 days.
Steve, this is the problem. Is that you come to us alleging that there's a violation of the public meeting laws. You in fact go so far as to email this group with a PowerPoint presentation, I don't know where you got it from, to try to educate us about what the public meeting laws tell us we have to do. But in those subsections that you forward to us, there is a clear option for us to deny that the violation took place. And when we exercise that right, you tell us that that's wrong.
You're lying if you do that.
But
The
that,
violation clearly
no,
took place.
Steve,
if you locked somebody out.
Steve, the issue isn't whether or not we're lying, is whatever you think the truth of the matter is. The question is whether or not we have the ability to deny that the violation took place. We do, and we are exercising that right. You have options beyond that once we've made that determination, and you're free to exercise those rights if you want to. But to sit here and chastise us and suggest that because
I'm looking for some intellectual honesty here.
and I'm giving it to you. And I'm sorry that it does not comport with your understanding of how that situation played out. But here's
No,
my.
you're right. You have an out with the default. You have an out
It's-
with the default, but that's leaving all the other commission members who aren't attorneys intellectually dishonest.
I just asked them. I did exactly
And
what you want to hear.
they're scared to take risks.
Okay.
They're scared to do
Okay.
anything that might.
All
have
right.
value.
All right. Okay.
You don't need to speak for us, okay?
All right.
So is there anything actionable we need to do at this point?
No,
Okay, that's
the attorney felt there wasn't anything
Yeah.
that we needed to do at this point to follow up on this.
So we don't need to move on.
You should be hearing from the
Yeah.
attorney directly, not from Mike's third-hand interpretation.
So I move that we move on to the next
Yes,
agenda. item.
thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you,
Thanks.
Gabe. Let's move on to the public input session on zoning barriers. I assume we're just taking comments from,
Yeah, so we can just
Love it.
open it up to folks. The idea of this, and I mean, maybe Gabe can almost kick this off. The idea of this was that throughout the city plan adoption process, we heard from a number of people. A lot of the input we received on the housing chapter and the land use chapter were recommendations of zoning changes that we should make in order to facilitate and improve the permit process. And so we told everybody then that as soon as the city plan was moved to council, we would move right forward immediately to hear from everybody to start to make a list of what are the changes that people think we should look at. And the planning commission has decided they'll try to make potentially two lists, an expedited list that we could take to city council that could be done under an interim amendment if that was appropriate. If there are certain things that are immediate and need to get fixed, we could do some interim changes, and otherwise we would set up zoning amendments, take 6 months. So it's going to take some time to get through. So if we have some other ones, we'll work on a longer term plan for some of the bigger things. But we wanted to hear from people who are in the development community and trying to really hear as much as specifically as possible of things that are, and we did get, we'll note for the record that we have comments from Lucky Boardman, Zachary Hunter. Is that the other one? Yes. And Peter Kelman. And I think that was that it, or am I missing one? No, I think those are the three that we received in writing, but we, as we said, we just want to get a lot of very specific comments or where things that people got hung up on, where costs were increased, things that we can sit down and start making some recommendations immediately to try to make some headway on efficiency. So if anyone wants to come up and give some input. And please introduce yourself so we've got your name for the record.
Hi, everybody. Some of you know me, but for those that don't, my name is Sarah Hoffmeyer, and I am a landscape designer. I live up on Terrace Street, and my husband and I own Equilibrium. We've been designing and installing landscapes for over 15 years. And in those 15 years, I have worked regularly with developers, both small and large. So single homeowners that have decided to renovate a building and make it into a triplex or a quadplex, up through really larger developers that commercial buildings. So I don't know how often the landscape designer, architect, engineer side is represented. So I just wanted to voice a couple of just quick opinions. So I want to start out by saying I very much support lessening the barriers to development in Montpelier. That is the number one thing that I've seen from working with developers, is that cost is always the first thing that comes up, whether it's hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. It's expensive, and each barrier that we have that is expensive adds to that. And the second thing is time. That is what I always get a little bit of, or hear that they're pressured. And that's to get people want to get tenants in, sell the building, or shore up like a construction loan. So I hear that from my clients. I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget things. But having said that I support lessening those barriers. I do think we need to maintain a balance and responsible development. So one of the things I want to bring up is when I'm brought onto a team, usually I'm working directly with engineers and architects, builders, that group, having diverse eyes, professional diverse eyes on a project can be really, really helpful at the beginning in the planning stages. It can help to save money later. I know that I'm a Vermont certified horticulturist, and that's what qualifies me to look at major site plans. So much of what I do has nothing to do with plants, which shocks everybody. When I show up, I'm reviewing plans that I'm getting from architects and builders and engineers. And the three top things that I look for are safety. I look for access and circulation and drainage. Those are the big ones. So just to give an example real quickly, I was working with an engineer. It was a big development, a commercial building. And she had lived in Vermont for a hot minute, but had moved down to Georgia. And she'd been there for many years. And so she developed a great site plan, but she didn't leave enough room for snow melt. And it's such a small consideration. It was April is the month that we have this, where the ground is frozen, so nothing's infiltrating, and huge snow piles. And they would have melted across a driveway and a parking lot area. And that's icing, so it's a safety issue. And so just doing those little quick adjustments and it's something that, yeah, it might not save money at the time, but it's kind of the right thing to do. So I feel like that's a time when having a group of people looking at the plans, especially if they're not local, it can make a difference, just having eyes on the site. Okay, and then I'll wrap it up here. So cost savings, I do feel like that is something. And then also liability. So developers are taking on not just a money burden, but the responsibility. And I think having a team of professionals at the beginning can help to lighten that burden by, if there's a complaint or there's something that comes up early on in the process, they have professionals to rely on, whether it's permitting or some of these considerations that feed into the planting plan. Ultimately, why I go through like the site analysis. Okay, all this being said, the whole thing that I would love to see changed in the zoning, and it seems like I'm shooting myself in the foot for this, is being a Vermont certified horticulturist just means that I'm good with plants. And so I don't think that should be part of a qualification. What I would love to see is that someone with an advanced degree, either in landscape architecture, landscape design, or land use planning is a qualified member to look at a major site plan review, because it's so much more than plants. Full stop. That was it. Yeah.
Can I ask questions?
Yes, please.
So when you're brought into, well, the large scale projects make sense to me because I'm imagining like a large footprint where there might be drainage issues.
Sure.
But when we're talking about someone like a small scale developer, are they required to bring you in too?
At this second, I believe it's triplexes. Stop me if I'm wrong. Meredith, you too. Triplexes and quadplexes that require it.
Okay.
But it is interesting.
they're
I
going
don't
from, like,
think
2
it's
to
the
3
size of
units?
the site that, well, it can be also maybe that too. Mike, stop me if I'm saying something
Yeah.
incorrect. But it's a good question because it gets into what should be mandatory and what shouldn't. And it is one of the barriers. And I almost wonder about getting rid of that for folks that have smaller, very straightforward sites. You're right, it's less of an impact. And maybe it's an option. That's where, you at least provide this resource, because I know that I've connected many people that I've worked with a good example is when I come to a site, I look at adjoining properties to make sure that whatever impacts are happening on the site are not affecting the adjoining properties. It's super important. Things like when you clear a site, what used to be a stable forest now has a sharp edge. So those mature trees are more apt to fall during windstorms and ice storms. And so I look at the hazard trees of, oh, your neighbor has one that looks like it needs to be seen by an arborist. So I'm giving those recommendations that are cost savings eventually if I'm catching something. But I might not be, that doesn't apply to every site. It depends. It's such a gray zone. But
So my other question is if the footprint of the building isn't being changed, do you think your presence is necessary?
It depends on, because something that I look a lot to are access and circulation. So what's the parking lot? Where are you pushing? Where's snow storage? Where are cars being parked? Is there enough turnaround room? And the engineers and the architects usually also provide this plan. I'm just reviewing it a lot of times. But like I said, with the snow storage thing, that's a really big one. And just making sure like pathways are clear. So a lot of times I'll look at roof lines and where there's walkways, where things are being parked. But do you have a metal roof? Does that need a snow guard? Because in the winter, you're going to have ice coming down. I mean, I'm looking at all the different safety issues and just making sure that they're thought of, the considerations. And again, you could hire an engineer and an architect that are already thinking of these things. So that's where it's more of a double check. And I mean, I wouldn't say this without the 15 years of experience to say that I have caught things. And people have caught things on my end too, but so it goes both ways. But I don't know. That's where that gray zone is of
What's the
when
balance?
it's a balance. That's it. Because it shouldn't be that big of a barrier too. That if it gets to be that point, if people aren't developing because they don't want to hire whoever, an engineer, an architect.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe this is too personal. What do you think? Because I think you're the only landscaper here. So you are now going to speak for all landscapers in Montpelier. Like, what is what would a landscaper's fee be to consult with like, say like a 4-unit conversion?
Yeah, I am very transparent with fees. Typically it takes anywhere from, I've spent as little as 5 hours reviewing very straightforward sites, I always have a plan set that goes to every client. And as much as some people want to go they want to go deeper. Once we have those first couple of talks, they're like, oh, I do want to create a space for my tenants where they can have a vegetable garden or have a place to gather. And so there's other factors that go into it then, and then we build on it. So it can be anywhere from 5 hours to 20 hours. But the average cost, I would say, is around $1,000
Okay.
to create a plan, and that's creating a planting plan and all the site considerations that go into it. Inform the planting. The planting plan is like the quickest, easiest thing.
Right.
It's like once you look around at the site and you've got, okay, well, here's where snow loads are going, here's where people are moving. Where does it make sense to put the trees so that they have the biggest probability of success?
So is the $1,000 the planting plan or
Yeah, it's all
like
the documents.
Is it, do you charge separately for like the access and egress
No.
planning? It's all in the
No,
same
because
thing.
all those things have to happen before the
Okay.
planting plan.
Right.
It has to. So
So the
it-
$1,000 would be part of that.
it's everything.
It's everything.
Yeah. And I've worked with clients that, have 8-hour meeting, over the course of like 3 months of working with them, 8 hours of meetings and 10 hours of emails. And so it's like way more than that, but the average, yeah.
And but then you said before it got up to like $100,000 in some
Oh,
cases.
no.
Oh, no.
No, not for
Not for
me.
you.
No,
Just
no, no,
additional
not for me.
costs to the
No, I'm saying with
developers.
developers that to build a building is hundreds of
Oh, right,
thousands of
right.
dollars, maybe
Okay.
millions of dollars. And so it's a drop in the bucket when you're looking at that, but it still shouldn't be. It is time, it is money, and sometimes sites are straightforward and it's like, that's where it comes down to what you all think. But I just want to say that with, I was really just coming here to get rid of the the horticulture certification, my own certification. But I do have, to have an advanced degree, I think that's where it's important. You shouldn't just know your plants. You really need to, because that way you're informing good, responsible development. And I could go down that whole road of like, I'm a true environmentalist and I want to see good site stewardship and everything like that. But we want to get the buildings built. It really is something that's important to me as a Montpelier resident. Yeah.
So just to clarify, I don't know what the specific regulation says, but you're saying to replace horticulture certification with land use planner or landscape architect instead?
No, it's it's always been a landscape architect or someone with a Vermont certified horticulture
Oh, okay.
certification, sorry. And I really think to take away the Vermont certified horticulturist
Oh, okay.
label
Just leave.
and to put some, like I have a master's degree in landscape design. So I have that horticulturist certification, but I really think my master's degree is way more important than that certification. I have friends who own plant nurseries that also have that certification and they know squat about land use planning. So they can tell you different species of trees, but they don't know where to put them. So that's kind of,
Okay.
does that make sense okay, yeah. So I'd say someone with an advanced degree in either landscape architecture, landscape design, or land use planning. They've been trained, they've had those courses of how to site things, how to read a landscape, how to read engineering plans, grading plans, super important, how to grade. And especially with the floods, you need to know how drainage moves through a site. I'm advising people on like when to put in gutters, when to hard pipe them in. It's stuff that has nothing to do with plants, but it does, because that's where the water's moving. Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thanks.
taking the time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is James Moore. I've got a number of comments, so at such time as you just want to say that's plenty, let me know. I also have seen some of the written comments that were submitted, and I just wanted to kind of second the comments that Mr. Hunter made. And then also I thought that Mr. Kelman had a lot of really good recommendations kind of from the big picture standpoint. I was going to start there, kind of a bigger picture. I just went down to New York City for the week. Drove down Monday, kids, get them out and during school break week and see a little bit beyond Vermont. And it was just a really fun place to think about this conversation. Being in a city that literally rebuilt itself at a one period in time every 10 years. Like everything that was there was gone and replaced. And it's also a beautiful city from the standpoint of you've got incredible historic structures. You know, we were up in Harlem and we're checking out Hamilton's Grange, which he purchased on 33 acres in Harlem back in the day. You know, gorgeous historic structure and ultra modern, you know, right there as well. And I think that, you know, no desire to see 100-story buildings here in Montpelier. But I do think that with some of the changes that you all put into the city plan, and the ambition in those requires kind of a different lens on what development in Montpelier could potentially look like. And I think it'd be good for us to dream a little bigger. So I think in terms of simplification, as a relatively new developer to this game, I will tell you, I've read a number of zoning regs in central Vermont, and to see literally hundreds of pages. Our zoning regs are over 200 pages. We have like 14 districts plus overlay districts, and we have 8 square miles. We got to ask ourselves, what are we doing this for? And I think we're doing this out of a deeply rooted preservationist mindset. We like what we have. So we think about, like, how do we make sure that the zoning adequately describes everything that's there and make sure that the zoning lines up with 80 or 90% of what's there. And it's all about not changing things. And I think that is why modern day zoning exists, was in large part to not change much and to protect the status quo and to protect the people who didn't want their neighborhoods to change. And I think what I got from you all was a real consensus that we actually want to see things change. And that means, like, you all are thinking about doing something radically different with zoning than the 200 pages that you have in front of you, which is really cool, but it's probably also a pretty big lift. So I would encourage you to think about 2 or 3 zoning districts. I would encourage you to rethink all things like height, like setbacks. You know, would it be horrible in 20 years' time if we had a 10-story building in Montpelier? Could be awesome. Gorgeous historic downtown, few 10-story buildings around. Like, that is like the farthest thing from imaginable reading our current zoning, but could be a real boon to the region to have some actual density and to have some verticality. So I think that the neighborhood characteristic descriptions are incredibly problematic, and they are in every zoning district, and they are so detailed in terms of exactly what's there. Even so, we have 14 districts or whatever it is. Even within those districts, we have countless neighborhoods that are described. Even in Res 9000, you've probably got half a dozen or more neighborhoods. And each of those neighborhoods gives folks a reinforcement that what we want is more of exactly what is there. And I don't think that's what we want in our city. I'll pick on my friend Meredith. Sorry, Meredith. I just went through the DRB subdivision process. And oh my gosh, like talk about 200 pages. It was one DRB meeting. Meredith put together a 200+ page document for the DRB to review. It was amazing. I mean, it's beyond thorough. It was really, really impressive. There is zero chance we are going to do 75 new units per year in the city and that was one subdivision and one historic structure going away. Now, a lot of that's cut and paste and emails together, but those DRB members need to read 200 pages to do their job, to subdivide one lot. And we're talking about orders of magnitude of work. So I think we've got to be very cognizant as you think about the zoning regulations also, what city resources do we actually have? And what city resources can we reasonably expect to deploy to actually achieve the goals? We can't do what we're doing now. It's not sustainable. We would lose fantastic staff like Meredith in a heartbeat if we asked them to do that level of work. And we don't have the resources to hire 10 Merediths. However, I'm going to go back to the neighborhood character. The staff comments on this was part of our subdivision, was during the final application hearing, the board will need to determine whether the proposed subdivision is compatible with and continues the traditional settlement pattern in the city and in the Elm Street neighborhood, which is a subsection of the Res 9000 zoning district. Staff suggests that it does, given the context of the purpose of the Res 9000 zoning district and the layout of other parcels on the river side of Elm Street in this neighborhood. So here we have staff not only going to the neighborhood level, but literally the side of the street in the abutting parcels within a neighborhood, within a zoning district, doesn't meet the character. That is the exact mentality that folks bring to these meetings and object to projects. I live up on Town Hill, and the land that we were on, a previous owner of the land who we bought it from, tried to subdivide it and wanted to build a quadplex. And oh my goodness, all of the comments about like does not comport with the neighborhood, and I was here 70 years ago and you should have seen it then, and that's the neighborhood. And our hopeful first project is literally across from the street from that and is a quadplex. So we'll see what happens when folks come out, but when folks can grab the zoning document and say, look, character of neighborhood, it's supposed to be exactly what's here. And like, that's the mindset. We're in real trouble. We're not going to do much of any development here in Montpelier. The next one I would draw your attention to is the chapter 220, the overlay zoning districts. I don't know when the last time was you all read this, but this is the design review overlay district. I think there's a huge opportunity to scrap this and to rewrite it with a proactive vision for what we all want to see in the city that incorporates new construction, modern design with historic structures. Because what this is, it's literally like the city council also finds that the city's special historic and aesthetic character has been compromised in the past, either through the destruction of entire buildings, through the incremental loss of small or selective features on individual buildings that results in substantial cumulative loss over time, or through the location or design of new buildings that compromise the visual and historic quality of the city. That is what our zoning regs say right now. And that's part of why, as a developer, and developers read this stuff and go, oh my gosh, this is like all of downtown. That's the rule. That's as it's written. Yeah, like huge opportunity for you all. But I think it really is like, got to rewrite this stuff, because right now it's telling people, go away. Do not build here. Do not think of doing anything besides a replica of something that exists. I'm going to speak to the major site plan. And I was appreciative of the previous person who was testifying, sharing that developers are keenly focused on money because it's an expensive process, and building new is very challenging right now, and time. And the time side is also related to the money side, because if you're taking out a huge loan and you're borrowing that money is costing you thousands of dollars every single month. Just to like, so to the extent that a process, it's kind of like, oh, it's going to take an extra 4 weeks. Oh, shoot, it's like an extra $3,000 of financing right there. And so it's interesting, the major site plan review requires going back to the DRB. It requires an additional round of meetings that might be something that could be administratively approved. And I'll share on the project that we do have to go through major site plan review because it is more than 2 units. That is adding time to the process. It also added time and work, as we've got to go out and find a professional lighting engineer and a landscape architect or horticulturalist. Thankfully, we found Sarah and are working with Sarah. However, we are also working with an architect who's designing the building. We are also working with a professional engineer who's doing the grading plan and looking at all of that stuff. So there is a component of like, we're paying now 3 people to look at the roof line and think about gutters. We're paying 3 people to look at the grading on that site. So it's not just one professional. And I don't doubt that, you know, each of those people catches something from time to time that other professionals would miss. But for goodness sake, like when you have 3 professionals, we're paying for 3 professionals to look at the same stuff. It really does start to add up. And the $1,000 that was mentioned is just the landscape part, or the horticulturalist certification. We struggled mightily to find anybody who was a professional lighting engineer to meet that standard. And we had one consultant who responded and said, well, we could do the lighting and the landscape stuff for, I think it was like, when you added in their travel fees and stuff, it was probably going to be $4,000. This is a quadplex. We're literally, so what we ended up doing is going to our architect and having the architect do the lighting plan and having the horticulturalist do the planting plan. And it's literally like 4 lights on the front of the building. Like, we don't want lights in the parking lot. The city doesn't want us to have lights in the parking lot. And we have 4 lights that shine down. That's what the zoning regs require right now. So I would be very happy to go through the zoning regs with you all in greater detail and suggest language if that's something that would be helpful. I think I've probably more than taken up my time, but it's 200 pages, so there are a few things to comment on.
You came during the city plan and you had 6 words that you wanted changed. Can you at least give us that? I'll defer to everybody else whether we want to go through the plan, or certainly we can always take written comments.
Yeah.
Can you give us those 6 words again?
Yeah, that relates to what triggers the requirement to go into to do the major site plan review. I think it's really smart some of the tack that Mike and Meredith have taken in terms of like more and more is able to be administratively approved, which is great. But right now, if you have more than 2 units, you're required to do a major site plan review. You could change that to more than X. At a minimum, I think it should be more than 6, because that lines up with the zoning changes that you all had made previously in terms of any lot with municipal services can have, 6 units on it. So at a minimum, I think it could be 6. You could say 10, you could say 12, you could like pick your favorite number that you all think is appropriate. But that one is a quick and easy change that would make many projects that much easier to move through. I also think it'd be fantastic to make the sketch plan review optional. If an applicant is ready and works with the city. Oh, and that's the other thing is we also go to the city. The city comments on our driveway. The city looks at our grading plan. The city looks at, fire. I met with the code official and the fire chief to talk about, access for the building and what, like, we have lots of people looking at these things, and sometimes it's redundant, which adds more. But yeah, I think making the sketch, if you've got your ducks in a row, you can cut a month out of the process, or actually it's probably 2 months out of the process right there for a simple subdivision.
So I have a question about your subdivision.
Yeah.
So this is the subdivision that required a 200-page document for DRB to understand?
The DRB was addressing 2 issues. This was probably 40 or 50 of the 200. The other one was a demolition of a historic structure.
Unrelated to you?
Unrelated.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Um,
Just saying, like,
so what are you trying to do? What is your subdivision? Like,
it
are you
was
trying to divide a plot?
it was taking a single plot and creating hopefully a new buildable lot. So it was 2.3
dividing it.
acres. It's saying existing house will stay on 1.5 acres, creating a new 0.8 acre lot next to it, the side yard, to create a new buildable lot in town.
Okay. What are the kinds of things that Meredith is highlighting for DRB in that decision? Like, what is the concern that you think the city had?
Oh,
that division?
Yeah, I have no issue at all with, I think Meredith put together an incredibly thorough report that touches on, but what she has to do for the DRB is go through all of the applicable sections of the zoning regulations and make a note on every, it does line up with this, or this is something that you should talk about with the applicant, or this is the standard that you're supposed to be applying here, and it's just like, again, I think it was incredibly thorough. I'm just thinking if she had to do that, call it, because that was just for the subdivision. Then there's a zoning, then there's a zoning permit. If she had to do that 300 times over the course of a year.
That's what made it balloon into like a 40-page document, because she had to go through and check all these boxes.
And a lot of that document is also compilation of communications. So it's like an email chain with the city transportation folks about the driveway. And that, I asked if, the R10 radius of the driveway would be okay. And, that goes to this city transportation head, and they come, yes, that's okay. And all of that is in there for the DRB to review. Okay. So a lot of it is cutting and pasting, I would imagine, but it's incredibly thorough, incredibly detail oriented, and a lot of work. And that's all I'm suggesting is, as you simplify the zoning regulations, that work could and should also be simplified so that it's easier for the DRB to address things when it actually has to go to the DRB, but it also less has to go there. And therefore, it's like, yeah, the administration or the city staff did their job, everything lines up, off it goes.
How long of a delay would you say this caused in the project? And is this like a 4-week process to get it ready for DRB? Like,
The DRB subdivision process is, as it's laid out right now, is you meet with the planning administrator. You then compile, following that meeting, you compile documents for sketch plan review. Those documents, I think, all go to all of the like department heads within the city. Well, for sketch plan review, then you go to like that needs to be noticed, just like, you know, so you got to get on the meeting. 30 days later, you can actually have the DRB sketch plan meeting. Then you take all of that information, then goes to the various city officials to get feedback. That gets compiled to put together the final packet, final subdivision packet. Then you can put that on the calendar. That takes 30 days to get noticed. Then the DRB votes on the final packet, or makes recommended changes, I guess. Then the final decision needs to be written up. And after it's written up, then the final Mylar can be filed with the city. So it was the final DRB approval meeting was last Monday, a week ago. And
when did you start?
I bought the property. No, it wasn't that. I mean, this is lightning speed, I think. This is lightning speed. I bought the property at the beginning of February.
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah. But nobody's living in the house because I can't have anybody living there when I'm about to sell it. I'm not allowed to put it on the market. Our zoning regs say you're not allowed to put it on the market until the subdivision is final, which is reasonable. Like,
Right.
you don't know what you're selling.
That's state law, but yes.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah, like I said,
That's
it's reasonable,
makes
but
sense.
all I'm saying is like, you have to wait. And, you know, the planning department has to write up the approval of my subdivision, but they've also got to write up the approval of the historic demolition, which I would imagine is even more involved. And goodness knows how many other projects they're also handling. So, you know, reasonably, my project isn't the number one thing. So
One of many.
now I'm in the patiently waiting for that to get written up so that we can file the Mylar, so that I can get the property back on the market. And then I'll have to go to do a zoning permit
Right.
when we come to actually building something there.
This is for a 4-unit.
No, this will probably be 2 or 3 units.
But this is like, any infill project would have to go through this process. Like. of
Some infill
splitting-
projects wouldn't have to do the subdivision. Many would.
I mean, unless you want the properties to be related to each other, but if you want
Right.
them to be 2 separate properties, then you would need to go through this division process.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're doing a subdivision, you'd have to go through that step.
So this is really helpful. Thanks for this. I actually have 2 just quick follow-up questions for you, and they just relate to what your initial sort of presentation was. The first one is the first question sort of relates more to, I just want to have a better understanding of how you view the zoning regulations. Just because I don't do what you do, is you're speaking about how the neighborhood characteristics descriptions, you know, you have some concerns about that. They operate as a way to sort of impede, or at least send a signal to someone like yourself, you know, from doing development. I've always sort of viewed those descriptions as just sort of like, this is a description of the status quo as it exists, you know. Do you see the language in the zoning regulations, those descriptions as operating differently from that?
Yeah, you're supposed to comply with neighborhood. Like, depending on the project type,
Mhm.
you're literally like, one of the requirements is that you align with the character of the neighborhood.
Mhm.
And so those descriptions are very important and are what the character of the neighborhood is judged against.
Sure, and I was always, and I understand that point, I guess. The question is like, do you see those descriptions as being like almost dispositive in terms of like what you can and can't do?
We're
as they
trying
relate
to,
to that,
I
or-
think that the city has taken some important positive steps
Mhm.
to say other stuff can maybe go there. But it's untried so far. And I think that they send the wrong message.
Okay, that's helpful. And then the second question I have, and I think this sort of dovetails into the second one, I'll tack onto this. With respect to your want to sort of see some changes to those neighborhood characteristics, descriptions, also with respect to the design review overlay. I hear what you're saying there. I guess, do you have a sense of, I mean, I think part of the, in my tenure here, you know, there's a very acute tension between, there's a certain want for historic preservation within this town, and clearly we've identified a need for further development. And I mean, I think that the zoning regs in a lot of places sort of highlight that tension. Do you have a sense or any ideas of how to sort of mesh? You know, there is a real sort of preservationist ethos here, and I think that there is some value to that. I think you can at least recognize that that's a priority to some folks here, and that we need to balance that priority against the need to develop it. Do you have any sort of thoughts about how to sort of mesh those two sort of?
I do.
Okay. Especially as it relates to both the overlay district and if there's sort of, if that can dovetail into the potential changes to the
Yeah.
characteristics descriptions.
I think there's something, you know, there are fundamentally different perspectives here. So I'll share mine.
Yep.
Which is that I think historic preservation is fantastic when we have a special building, for example, that should be preserved. Fantastic. Many special buildings that should be preserved. I'm all for it. I think historic preservation is very problematic when you start talking about cultural features and like, it's basically, to me, historic preservation is, this is a historic piece of architecture that, or a really important place or something that should be preserved for history's sake. The idea that historic preservation should maintain a community, I think, is really problematic. I think it is exclusionary. I think it ends up, and you can look across the country where you see examples of that level of kind of historic cultural preservation piece, basically meaning more and more wealthy people who are generally very homogenistic in their view of the value of their culture being the driving force, and everything else stays out. And it's been used that way across our country. So I think we can rewrite this to say, we want to absolutely preserve the most important historic parts of our downtown. But that does not mean, and we want those buildings next to modern new construction, because our city's going to move forward. Not, and you know, whatever gets built needs to look like that. And yeah, so I don't know if that's helpful, but it is I think there are different lenses with which people look at historic preservation, and in the zoning context, a lot of examples where it's really problematic.
Yeah, no, that is really helpful. And you can tell me if I'm wrong. It sounds like what you're saying is sort of identifying properties that rise to the level of of exercising historic preservation on a case-by-case basis is helpful, but sort of an aggregate kind of historic preservation writ large across downtown is problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And I just wanted to note, it's getting to 6:50. I wanted to make sure we left opportunities for everyone else to comment. Maybe we can always have James come back up, but I
Yeah.
just
no,
make a note that
Yeah.
we should make sure we leave time for everyone else here.
I do appreciate the opportunity and the effort.
What does a professional lighting engineer do?
There's a requirement in there under for the lighting, under the lighting standards. So usually it's an engineer will have a certification in it. Usually there's an engineer that'll have that background.
Floodlights, like what are they?
It has to do with measuring the amount of, it's getting into the foot candles, and the amount of light. You don't want to overlight or underlight things, because if you're looking at safety, you need to have a certain amount of light for you to have a safe parking lot. But too much light actually has the effect of creating a lot of shadows, and therefore creating places for people to hide. So there's lighting engineers have standards by which they try to apply for the amount of light, how they're cut off, how cut off the cutoff fixtures are, so that way it's not presenting light pollution onto neighboring properties. Those types of things are what a light engineer would take a look at. And in large projects, it's important, but
I know.
the question comes up for these.
Flows from like 5 miles away versus like a 3-unit building. Like needs like a lighting
Yes.
engineer, you know?
Yeah, and we've hearing from folks, we've had the conversation of, and I hadn't realized how low the threshold was for major site plan. I thought there was a square footage requirement. I thought there was more, and it turns out there isn't. So it is something staff will make a recommendation on, that we should be increasing that level, because those full requirements of landscape architects and everything for a 3-unit building just seems overkill. But okay.
Okay, Meredith, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, so it's not, so if a project is more than 2 units, it triggers site plan. To have it trigger major site plan, it needs to be more than 2 units and involve construction of a new principal building. So if your parcel's vacant and you're starting a new building and it's only 3 units, then yes, you're going to trigger major site plan. If you're converting an existing building to 3 units, you're not doing a large, say, I think the max is, I think it's up to 2,000 square foot addition. Like if you go to 2,000 square feet or more, then you're triggering major site plan. There is if you're converting an existing building, as long as you're not adding more than 10 parking spaces or more than 2,000 square feet of new building or new impervious surface, it's administrative site plan. I just do those reviews. I do know, I do feel James's frustration because where he's looking to do projects, it's all on vacant land. He's not looking at converting existing buildings. He's talking about building new buildings. So yes, if he's building a new building and it has 3 units in it, he's going to trigger major site plan, and under the existing rules have to hire that professional landscaper, professional lighting designer, engineer to provide me that information. But there's variations. It's not just the number of units that triggers major site plan.
But then to me, going back to historic preservation, if we are, I think correctly, insisting that we preserve our historic structures, all of the new housing would have, 75 new units, like we don't have enough buildings to cut up to create 75 new units a year. We are talking about building new buildings in order for that to happen. So they would get dragged into this because
yes,
it's
as
a
things
major
are
site plan.
written today, yes.
It just seems.
Yeah, that's
Well, it's like
that was what we had.
Yeah. And I always, whenever I hear 75 units, I'm thinking we're either building up or out. And I think many of us agree that building out is not what we want.
And just so we can put on the we are, and I told Meredith, and I said this, I should have probably said this at the start. we aren't gonna jump in and make corrections if we think there's something that's different. We want to get the input and then we'll talk
Yeah.
about what the input is, because, you know, some of the design review things we may have different opinions on as to the extent of their things. But at this point, we want to hear from people. Then we can talk about, you know, maybe there was a misunderstanding. This is what, you know, but we didn't want to open a back and forth debate on what the zoning rules say. We want to hear from people. We want to give everyone the opportunity to hear from them. And then we'll go back, and as a commission, we'll have a conversation about, okay, this is what the design review says. These are the concerns you heard. Where can we make adjustments? Where should we make adjustments?
Yeah, I just had heard Mike say something that wasn't quite right, so I just wanted to flag that in there, that there's some complexity there. That's all.
Okay.
If you have more stuff, but I see lots of words there, so send it along. We'll.
Great. It'd be helpful at the end to understand the timeline and process for you all so that we can best plug in. I know that this was kind of like, are there short, quick things, but also I'm happy to go through all 200 pages. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, James.
Next person.
Hey, sir.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Tim Haney, a Montpelier resident, and I think I've probably been involved in creating more homes than anyone in the room at the moment. Gabe's gonna catch me though, and maybe James, but I hope so, yeah. I think just kind of going through the process and trying to find a way to be constructive and help move this forward it's a challenge, and kind of listening to all this is interesting because I mean, ultimately, I think James referred to the zoning code, and you're probably some of the few people in the whole community that have really probably read it from stem to stern. There's just so much in here. And I think the ultimate message I would share tonight, echo James, is simplify. You know, when I look at times in my career when we created housing, this wasn't in place. Nothing like this was in place. The first 10 years of my career, the zoning code was probably like 48 pages long. It had the charts, it had the setbacks and the height regulations, all the key elements were there, but not this. The neighborhood descriptions, all these value statements. There's a lot of language that really requires you to have an attorney and an engineer sort it out to tell you what you can do with your property. And I don't think that's right. You know, I think we have an educated community with some really good citizens who care. And I think we've got to give them the opportunity to be able to read a code, an ordinance, and understand it and know what they can do with their property. And this doesn't allow that. You know, and even watching this last interaction with Mike and Meredith, even the staff struggles with understanding what's in this tome. It's really challenging. So I really, you know, I hope somehow the process can get to simplification. I think just tweaking it and adjusting it and taking a few words out here and there, it's not going to change the end result if you want to create more homes in Montpelier. Right now, this is the wall that's stopping it. You know, on the little day-to-day stuff, you know, what a piece to say too is initially doing some projects, you get frustrated with staff because they're the people who are charged with running you through the process and helping you. And I've come to realize that they're doing their job, and we have amazing people working with us, and we're fortunate. And I think they're trying to enforce and administer these regulations to the best of their ability. But we're asking them to do a lot, and I'm not sure that it's a lot that's actually producing the results we want. I know it isn't actually, because we're not getting housing and we need it. Don and I have embarked on trying to build a new home, which is probably on an infill lot that we bought. We're now the third owners of that lot since it was subdivided. The last two got into the process, saw what was going to be involved, and quickly turned around and sold it. And I can show you a number of cases where that's happened on other sites in town too. It is a trend to some degree, because when people get in and suddenly realize what's before them, it scares the heck out of them. And they don't do it. They just walk away. I was a little headstrong and thought, I can do this one. We can make it work. And, here we are. I think my first email to Meredith was in September and it's May. I don't even have what's deemed to be a complete building application for a single family home on an approved lot in Montpelier. Every time I go in and I think we've got it, there's another request, another set of engineering data, another something we need to produce. It all takes time. It all costs money. And it's an eye opener for me because I've been involved in the creation of at least this is probably the 19th home I've built in my time. It's an individual home in town. And the last one was about 20 years ago when we built one off Wyndham Drive. And so much has been added to this process since then. It's just not constructive. And I fully understand being in it, why nothing's happening. So I'd hope you'd take that into account. And I'm glad to go through and talk about how we can make changes. But my sincere hope is that we can get this back to being a manageable document that really works for Montpelier. And then with that, I think staff will have something they can manage in a reasonable fashion to help get the results we all want to see. So.
That's, thanks, thank you. That's just it looks like a red line, but that's just the current.
It is a red line from when I was in city council. I chose not to print another 200-page version.
Yeah, the planet thanks you. But that's our,
That is the red line.
okay, I'm just making sure that you didn't go through and make some edits yourself.
I have a few questions. So you said when you first started building in Montpelier, this wasn't the case. When did you start building in Montpelier?
Well, I came back from school and joined my dad. He'd been at it for quite a while. So in the early 80s, I came back in
1980?
81. And at that time,
Not that long ago. So isn't like
Independent Screen, Freedom Drive.
Maria,
what?
I'm sorry.
The 1980s?
I'm getting to this point too, but the 80s were a while ago.
But but those buildings aren't even allowed to be historically protected yet.
That is true.
Close. Who said that?
Dangerous.
I think that we're in the 70s right now.
I mean, the most recent streets we did were North Park Drive, which I think is one of the last streets built in Montpelier that was a city street, right?
Which one was that?
North Park Drive off Elm. 'Cause we built other streets, but they
Oh,
weren't
yes,
city
yep,
streets.
and Trillium and those
Before
type of-
Trillium.
Yep, just before,
Yeah.
but that same area though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was ended up being 15 homes, and
Right.
backed up to the park. We did a couple others after that, like Essex Way and a few that were smaller, really private driveways to serve several homes, but
And then my other question is about the single family home you're currently trying to build.
Yeah.
So we just heard that the major site plan review isn't triggered unless there's two units in a new building. So why would a single family home be held back?
I don't know that we're doing major site review. It's when this lot was created, apparently a lot of conditions were put on it.
On this specific lot?
By the people who created the subdivision? By the
Well,
prior
to
owner?
get it permitted, yeah.
Where is this lot?
Marvin Street,
Where is it?
Marvin Street.
Marvin Street.
It slopes.
Yeah. So is it the slope? What is the issue that they're trying to resolve?
Without taking too much of your time, it's steep slopes on the back. The front actually terraces, which is where we're trying to tuck a house. And it does go below the road. So, it goes down with a big terrace and then it goes down fairly steeply toward Liberty Street backyards.
Mhm.
And the other thing is just obviously water flow drainage. And that's been one thing we've had to hire a separate civil engineer to do topography and then a hydrologist or hydrology specialist who's doing some modeling to determine what'll happen in a 100-year storm with 4 inches of rain in 12 hours or something like that. And that's where we are right now.
Okay. And this is in September.
Yeah, it's a 1,400-foot ranch. It's not like it's
Right.
not an office building or a.
Yeah. I think I know the lot. I live on East State Street, so I think I know the lot you're talking about.
Yep.
Um.
And I think the only other piece I would say that's not on the new development side, but also with what we ask our staff to do is just process, like it was mentioned at one point, Mike mentioned, you know, administrative approvals. And I've heard that term for a while, but I can't remember being involved in much, if anything, that's ever really happened. It's like, how do we authorize our staff to be able to say, okay, here's a sign, it meets the code, just sign it and go, and not have to go through public meetings and all this process. It's absolutely nuts and not constructive. And I think it prevents people from maintaining their buildings and also from moving forward and doing things like creating more apartments within existing buildings. Folks just don't want to deal with that, and they shouldn't have to. If they're simple decisions, they should be able to be just made. And we have to let our staff have enough confidence that we're going to back them when they make those decisions, which hasn't been our history.
Right. I mean, it's a hilly city.
Yeah.
So it's not like your tract is that different than other people's, you know? And if every single new house has to go through this, there won't be new houses.
That's exactly right. I don't want to take,
Thanks, Tim.
but thank you.
You want to speak?
Okay. He's at his piece.
Right.
Everybody online? I haven't seen anyone online. If you're online and want to provide input, you can use the raise hand function. Otherwise, we have
I'll make
Steve.
one brief comment. If our grossly deficient city plan does not get adopted, our zoning and subdivision regulations get locked at the end of this year. We won't have the option of amending them until we get our plan completed. So there's a lot riding on it, and the cost of cutting corners might catch up to us here. So there may be a need to focus on what should be done on the emergency basis, because I think the emergency ones I can hold up for 2 years. Is that right? I mean, I think I sent you that section.
Yes, interim is allowed for 2 years.
Yeah, so focus on what needs to be done real quick in order to keep projects moving at all. And the whole rewrite probably might take a year, or it might end up with a locked plan and not able to be adopted. So, but I really want to commend Tim's concise statement that if we need to get it back down to 50 pages and not micromanage everybody's how close their plants are together. And if you sit through some design review committees, you'll pull your hair out, you know?
Mike, just a follow-up to that. I hadn't heard this before. The zoning is getting locked at a
No.
certain date.
No, so what Steve is referring to is that our city plan is valid through like December 17th or something. They're valid for 8 years, and we passed ours in 2017. So we've got to have, it has to be approved before December in order for us to have a valid plan, and you can't amend your zoning if you don't have a valid plan.
Oh.
So.
Gotcha.
Okay, so it's 7:08. Discussion of next steps. I don't know if we want to discuss some of the feedback now, or if we want to wait until the May meeting.
So what we had talked about was that Mike could compile another
Oh, right. Yes.
spreadsheet that would sort of tag the emergency, the ones the staff, like, and we'll talk
Yeah.
about it, right? But the ones the staff agreed with, emergency, and the ones that they thought were maybe required the longer term process. And then we come back in here. The one concern I have just about missing a meeting is that if there's emergency stuff, it's like, well, is it really an emergency if we're going to take a whole month off? Like, I feel like even if, like that we should get together somehow to look at whatever the staff put together. But I thought that's what we had agreed on when we set this meeting, is that the very next meeting would be to review a spreadsheet of recommendations from the staff.
Yeah, well, and I think we can, what do folks think about meeting on Tuesday, May 13th? Is this space available, or?
If not, I could find an alternative location if,
Okay.
but we have usually met on Tuesdays and it hasn't been an issue. So I would say chances are good that would be okay. I just need to have.
Oh, actually Tuesdays. Well, I can work it out.
So we were looking at, yeah, the 12th was the issue. So going to the 13th.
What's happening?
That's our next regularly scheduled.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
Like holidays and stuff.
Arian can't make that. And Mike
And
can't make
I think I've got an appointment that day. So
I just didn't know.
Yeah, nothing special.
I can do Memorial Day early.
It's a holiday that you don't know about, Aaron.
Well, then the same issue happens on Memorial Day. We
Right,
move it
yes,
to
Memorial
Tuesday,
Day is the, yeah.
hit up on Memorial Day.
27th. I could do
Okay.
13.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We can figure out.
I might not be able to do more than one Tuesday, but, because Tuesday is a little hard for me generally, but, I mean, you can meet without me also.
So Mike, if we had those things that we agreed on the 13th, what does that timeline look like?
Well, it's going to depend on a number of issues that we're just going to have to weigh out how long it takes, and we'll have to see how many changes we've got and what. I mean, at the fastest, we'd be finding out when we could get it on a council agenda. They've got very full agendas right now. I think they're meeting the 14th and 20. Well, they're meeting the 14th, the 21st. So while we're talking about it, they warned planning commission, the city plan public hearing first meeting, it's the 21st in its own meeting.
Oh,
So
okay.
they're having a meeting on the 14th, just a regular council meeting. They're gonna have a meeting on the 21st to talk about the city plan. Then on the 28th, they'll also talk about the city plan, but it's also a regular meeting. So they're hoping that by prioritizing a big meeting that they'll get most of the comments in there and then get some other comments as it goes on. But they might have more additional meetings after that. So then we're into June. So it's going to probably be interim. I'd have to look at what all the deadlines are. If it was approved on the 13th, we wouldn't be having it until probably the first council meeting in June.
Does that have to be two meetings, or can they approve the interim in one?
I'm not going to wing that off the top of my head. It might be one, might be two.
Okay.
But
And then just the regular process would be a 6 month,
the
7 month.
the other one is going to take a much longer process. We would probably be looking at many more pieces.
Yeah.
We really want to address the kind of the non-controversial, most straightforward ones that we think we could make a fair assessment of, and that it would have an impact, have a good impact, have a positive impact, and then some of the other ones would shift to a longer term discussion.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm kind of interested to see what these expedited items are that we come up with and how much of an impact it's going to have. I guess after hearing this and seeing, the actual zoning code stacked up in person, I'm I don't, maybe discouraged is too strong of a word, but it just sounds like some of this low hanging fruit isn't going to have an immediate impact. We sort of carve away $1,000 here, but it seems like there's going to be a lot more that needs to substantially change. So these expedited items maybe is a gesture of good faith more than it is, a radical improvement into, making people's lives easier. We'll see.
Well, yeah, and just
I
to
mean, I
tag
will
on
say,
to
like,
that.
if we go to 6+ unit, if we go to 6 units, that's just the months of time. If you just think of 8% money, right? If you're buying just 500 grand, like what that's costing you, that's all going to get passed on to somebody trying to buy a unit, right? So, I mean, I agree that there's a lot, like, hey, if we're trying to get to I don't know if we're going to get to 40 pages, but if we're trying to get to 40 pages, that's going to be a long discussion. But that single item could make a big impact on projects people are proposing right now. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. Yeah, I was just gonna add that although I do believe in simplifying the zoning and support it, there's a lot more housing development than just, regulations. And as somebody who works with affordable housing developers, I just want to, note that I'm very glad it'll make, life easier for private developers because we need a whole range of housing, but it's not gonna like, I don't know, I feel like sometimes we're talking about removing the zoning as if I don't know. I feel slightly uncomfortable with some of the tenor sometimes of the conversation, but I do support simplifying the zoning.
I do think having to go through major site plan review for over 2 units, what that's doing is encouraging 1-unit construction, right? Because if James wanted to build just another house on that point, on that lot, it seems that he wouldn't be in major site plan review. So the city is encouraging single family homes under the current structure. So then 2, and it's like, okay, so now we allow in-law units before. So, okay, so a house with like an in-law unit is allowed. But we're going to add all these barriers for anything more than that. And I think last year's zoning discussion, we kept coming back to, we heard from people who thought having 4 units on a lot would change the character of the city in a bad way. And there's all this coded language that for some reason 2 units is okay. 4 units is like, whoa, because then you're talking about apartments. And there is a lot of coded language when we talk about zoning in this way. And so to me,
They might be renters.
oh my
God.
we did have public comment from someone said, like, now you're talking about renters. As if like that alone seals the deal. So to me, the fact that major site plan review gets triggered at 2 units I think says a lot. And it harks back to all of the bad things about zoning and property law to me.
I just because we got a minute, I just want to comment also that even, we do have a workforce issue, right? So even if there was no zoning, right, we were like Williamstown or something, there would still be challenges building housing, but you can look at Barrie and Berlin, and you can see significant developments that have happened there over the last decade, and they haven't happened here. And you just have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is that? There are some challenges with developing. So I'm excited that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I guess to clarify, I just meant like, I don't feel like if we change the zoning, that's just gonna be like, wow, we're building all this housing suddenly. Like there's a lot more that goes into it. And it's, yeah, I don't know. A lot, if we don't build a lot of if we don't include affordable housing in the mix, then as you said, rental should be encouraged, but there's still some housing issues there.
Yeah.
Sean, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay. Okay, so we will, Mike, you feel like that's doable to have the, oh, sorry. Sorry, Tim.
Go ahead, Tim.
Jim shared it.
Were you calling on Tim or Jim?
This is Tim, but I just wanted to say I
Yeah.
see Jim's hand up and I would
Yeah.
love to hear from him. So just to jump in there.
Okay. Okay, so I'll ask Jim to unmute.
Nope.
Oh.
You unmuted yourself and remuted yourself.
Yep, let me try that again. Jim, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you. I just like to talk about some history back when I was on the council in 1999 to 2011. And first of all, I want to say that I liked what I heard from Tim and also James. Not really big on 10-story buildings downtown because I think a lot of the people like our downtown because it's a quaint little downtown. And that's why people like to come here. And if you're going to put 10-story buildings downtown, I'm fine with filling in downtown, but I think it's going to take away that quaint thing. And I'm a fourth generation Montpelierite, just to let you know. And I walk for 2 miles constantly through the place that Tim Heaney did on Freedom Drive and Independence Green. And I talk to the people there and they love it up there. They like the way it is. When I hear us say, somebody said, well, we got to build up and not out. No, there's nothing wrong with building out. I mean, Sabin's pasture could be a nice place to put stuff that can build out. It doesn't all have to be built up. There are only 2-story buildings up on Freedom Drive and Independence Green. I think it looks nice up through there. It was a farm. But what happened in the early 2000s when Sabins was trying to develop, it just plain turned this town upside down as welcoming developers, because there was such a fight about it, a group organized that wanted to strip the development rights of the people up there totally, wanted the council to take the land, strip the development rights. And ever since then, we've had a reputation of a place that's tough to build. And, everybody talks about we want housing, but I'm not seeing anything happen. And what I hear in government on so many issues that is said to me is talk, 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 nothing ever happens. And it's not just housing that nothing ever happens. I've probably been out among the people more than any of you sitting here, and they want to see some things done on a number of levels. There are people who want to get out of their big houses with 4 bedrooms and go to a smaller ranch like I live in. I live in a very small ranch, easy to maintain, easy to clean, easy to fix up because I'm in my 70s. And this is what people are looking for, but there's no place for them to go and buy a downsized housing. And they want to stay in Montpelier, and they want to open up their homes to families. I sold my mother's home when she passed away 1.5 years ago, and a family is living there. And really, our zoning regs are a big problem. I mean, I hear like vernal pools, we have a 500-foot distance. The state is 50. So why do we have such a big, things like that? I mean, Tim's absolutely right, and so is James, that it's impossible. And I'm going to tell you another thing, what our zoning does. It's making a lot of people do things in town that they're not bringing to Meredith. They're just doing them. And I can tell you, they know nobody's going to do anything about it because they don't want to go down just because they want to expand their deck and go through everything. I mean, really, we need to simplify stuff like they said, or we're just not going to get anything here. And I can tell you the council wants to see something happen. And we're not seeing it. I mean, when we're going to get this, I hope we kind of take a damn good look at it and do something. But you need to listen to these 2 developers that talk to you. Tim's done a lot of stuff here. I know James is new, but there's reasons why we're not getting anything done here, because people want to build and we're making everything hard for them. So I think you can't just think small. If it pushes things back, it pushes things back. I mean, I'm not into rushing to do anything just because we might want to do something in one area. We need to make this town a little more inviting, and you planning commissioners can have a lot to do with that, because zoning, I think, is what's really complicating the problem. It is too much, it's too deep. And I can tell you for sure, the mood on the council is we want to see something. We don't want to see us becoming 4,000 homes, okay? But we want to see some more homes to start spreading the cost of the water sewer, the cost of education. And I don't think we're going to see it the way we are now. It's just going to take way too long, and I'll be dead and a bunch of other people will be gone. So I think you really have to think about what's been said to you tonight, that it's too onerous, and we have to find a way to simplify it. I appreciate you letting me talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Tim, did you want to say something, or were you just pointing out that Jim? No. Okay, you're good. Okay. All right. So nobody else has their hand raised. So Mike, does that seem doable to do
Yeah, so what I'll
the 13th?
plan on trying to do for the 13th, and I'll have to see, hopefully we'll maybe be able to have Meredith again. What I'm thinking for the 13th is I'll do an overview of the zoning bylaws. We're not getting into them deeply, but enough to give you guys a framework for those of you who haven't seen the zoning to kind of get an understanding of these are the general provisions, this is where they apply, these are the major site plan, these are where they apply, these are the minor site plans, the administrative site plans. So that way you have a sense of what we're talking about in kind of in context. And then hopefully that will help if, because staff is going to have to kind of direct, if we're going to try to make this quick, I'll have to go through and make some administrative decisions of where I think the most appropriate places are for these emergency changes, these quick changes. So we'll have to go through and say, I think here are a couple of places where we could get quick changes through. These others are probably bigger things that require policy discussions. If we're going to affect historic properties, we're probably going to want to go and have a bigger conversation. Those types of things. But we can have those and put all that together into as I said, a quick presentation so everyone gets an overview, and then a recommended list of changes, and then a list of things that I heard. I'll try to put together a matrix like we did for the city plan, try to lay out all the comments, or as many of the comments as we can, and kind of put that all in there and see how many of them we can fit in. And James, if you have any more that you want to email me, let me know and we can get them on the list. So that's what I'll do for the next meeting on the 13th, Tuesday, the 13th.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so the next item is considering we have 3 sets of minutes.
So I'll just mention for the first 2 sets of minutes, we had a number of questions that came up on people who was there, who wasn't there, and their comments. So thank you to Leah for giving me all of her comments. I plugged most of those into the 24th and made the corrections to the 31st. So hopefully this is closer. And then the 14th are obviously the new ones.
For 14 minutes, the general business section. I thought, Ariane, that you said that you had received the message about the open meeting violation.
Oh, yes. I did. I just didn't realize that I needed to take any action.
Right, but you
Yeah,
had received, I
yeah.
think at the meeting you said, like,
Yeah.
oh, I did, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if somebody wants to suggest an amended.
Yeah, I mean, should it just be changed to the chair didn't realize she had received the message? I think that was more
Yeah,
consistent with what you said. So I would suggest making that change.
if anyone wants to move, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, can you point out what date that was? 31st,
April.
the 14th. Okay. I make a motion to approve the April 14th agenda with that amendment in there. And I can also make a motion to approve the March 31st and March 24th agenda as well.
Second to approve those minutes.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, or we don't have to say that. I get confused every time.
All those.
Thank you.